At 62 years old, I never imagined my life would spiral into such profound emptiness. My name is Jack Thompson, and for decades I was the backbone of my family, always working hard to provide, always ensuring everyone else's needs came first. But now I sit alone in this cavernous house that once echoed with laughter, joy, and warmth, but has since become a mausoleum of memories. The silence here isn't just quiet, it's suffocating, like an invisible force pressing down on me every second of every day. It feels as though time itself is mocking me, each tick of the clock louder than the that reminding me that my days are slipping away, one by one, into oblivion. Every night as darkness envelops the house, the shadows seem alive, creeping closer, whispering cruel truths about how forgotten I've become. One particular night, I woke up drenched in sweat from a nightmare so vivid it still haunts me. In the dream, I wandered through our home, the same home where Sarah and I raised our children, but it wasn't familiar anymore. The walls were crumbling, the air thick with decay, and no matter how loudly I shouted, no one answered. No Adam, no Emily. Not even their faintest echoes remained. I screamed until my throat burned, pleading for someone, anyone, to hear me. But the world outside had moved on without a trace of my existence. When I finally jolted awake, gasping for breath, I realized something horrifying. Maybe the nightmare wasn't far from reality. Maybe deep down, I am already forgotten. The mornings aren't any kinder. They bring fleeting moments of hope, only to crush them mercilessly. Just yesterday, I sat at the kitchen table staring blankly at the newspaper while the grandfather clock in the hallway relentlessly counted out the seconds. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Each sound reverberated through the empty rooms like a funeral march, dragging me further into despair. For a moment, I thought I heard footsteps upstairs, the pitter-patter of little feet or perhaps Sarah humming her favorite tune. But when I called out, there was nothing. Only silence greeted me, colder and harsher than before. It's not just loneliness gnawing at my soul, it's abandonment. A slow, creeping sense that the people who once loved me most have left me behind. Oh, they call occasionally, but their voices lack sincerity. Their words feel rehearsed, distant, as if they're checking off some invisible list of obligations rather than speaking to their father. And why wouldn't they? They've built new lives elsewhere, busy, fulfilling lives, and I'm merely a relic of their past, gathering dust in the corner of their minds. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if they would even notice if I disappeared entirely. Would they search for me? Or would they simply assume I'd chosen to retreat deeper into solitude? But what terrifies me most isn't being forgotten. It's realizing how much I've changed. Once strong and self-assured, I now find myself questioning everything. Was I a good enough husband? Did I do right by my kids? Have I wasted my life chasing things that didn't matter? These questions swirl endlessly in my mind, feeding the growing storm within me. And yet, despite all this pain, fear, and uncertainty, I know one thing for certain. Life won't stop moving forward. Not for me, not for anyone. Whether I rise above this abyss or succumb to its weight depends entirely on me. But can I truly face it alone? In the weeks following Sarah's passing, I began to notice a chilling pattern. My children were slipping away from me. Adam and Emily, who had once been my entire world, now seemed like distant figures in my life. Their calls grew sparse, each one shorter than the last, and when they did reach out, their voices carried a rehearsed cheerfulness, as if they were ticking off an obligation rather than genuinely connecting with their father. It wasn't just the lack of communication that stung, it was the emptiness behind it. Each conversation felt like a cold breeze blowing through an already frigid house. One day, as I sat on the sofa staring at the phone, I waited for what felt like hours. It was my birthday, and I had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that Adam or Emily would call to wish me well. The clock ticked mercilessly, each second amplifying the silence around me. Finally, unable to bear the quiet any longer, I picked up the phone and dialed Adam's number. My heart pounded in anticipation, but when he answered, his tone was clipped and distracted. "Dad, I'm really busy right now. Can we talk later?" he said, barely pausing to hear my response before hanging up. I stared at the receiver in disbelief, the dial tone buzzing mockingly in my ear. Busy. The word echoed in my mind, twisting into something sharper, more accusatory. How could my own son be too busy for me? Had I become so invisible that even my presence on this earth no longer mattered? That night, I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, clutching the armrest of the sofa as tears streamed down my face. The house, once alive with laughter and warmth, now felt like a tomb. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside reminded me of how profoundly alone I was. The days that followed were no better. Emily called a few days after my birthday, her voice hurried and distant. She asked about my health, but her questions lacked depth, as though she were skimming the surface of our relationship without diving deeper. "How are you holding up, Dad?" she asked, her tone polite but detached. I wanted to tell her the truth, that I was drowning in loneliness, that the weight of her absence was crushing me, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I forced a smile into my voice and replied, "I'm fine, sweetheart. Don't worry about me." But the lie tasted bitter on my tongue. As the weeks turned into months, I began to feel like a ghost haunting my own home. The photographs on the walls, images of happier times, seemed to mock me. There was Adam as a child, grinning widely as he held up a fishing rod. There was Emily, her face alight with joy during her college graduation. Those moments felt like relics of another life, one I could no longer access. The house, which Sarah and I had filled with love and laughter, now stood hollow, its walls absorbing my grief instead of reflecting happiness. John, my neighbor, visited occasionally, and though his company provided some comfort, it couldn't fill the void left by my children's neglect. One afternoon, as we sat together in silence, he looked at me with knowing eyes. "You ever feel like they've forgotten you?" he asked, his voice heavy with shared sorrow. I nodded, unable to speak. He didn't need to elaborate. We both understood the pain of being pushed aside by the very people we had sacrificed everything for. It wasn't just the physical distance that hurt. It was the emotional chasm that had formed between us. I found myself questioning everything. Had I been a good enough father? Was I too hard on them when they were younger? Or had I simply outlived my usefulness, becoming nothing more than a memory they occasionally dusted off? These thoughts consumed me, gnawing at my spirit until I felt like little more than a shadow of the man I used to be. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the thick fog, I decided to take a walk around the park, a feeble attempt to shake off the heaviness that had settled in my chest. The air was crisp, but my body felt like it was weighed down by invisible chains. As I walked, a sudden sharp pain shot through my chest, and I stumbled, clutching my heart. My vision blurred, and for a moment, I thought this might be the end. Gasping for breath, I looked around, hoping someone would notice. But the few people nearby were too absorbed in their own worlds, earbuds in, phones out, hurrying past me as if I were invisible. It was then I realized just how fragile life had become for me, how easily I could slip away without anyone noticing. That incident shook me to my core. I couldn't keep living like this, waiting for life to pass me by, or worse, waiting for death to catch up with me. Something had to change. Determined to reclaim some semblance of control over my life, I began exploring ways to reconnect with the world outside my silent home. I started attending community events at the local center, hoping to find solace among others who shared my struggles. However, the path wasn't easy. During one particularly humiliating experience, I approached a group of seniors playing chess, thinking they might welcome me into their circle. Instead, one man looked me up and down before sneering, "You look too frail for this game, Jack. Maybe try something less demanding." His words stung more than I cared to admit, but I forced myself not to retreat back into the shadows. It was during those early days of trying and failing to integrate that I ran into John again. We'd exchanged pleasantries before, but now our conversations took on a deeper tone. One evening, as we sat on a bench overlooking the quiet park, he confessed his own battles with loneliness. "Sometimes," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I feel like I'm shouting into the void, hoping someone will hear me, but no one does." His words struck a chord deep within me because they mirrored my own fears so perfectly. From then on, John and I became confidants, sharing stories late into the night about the lives we once led and the emptiness we now faced. Those talks weren't solutions, but they were lifelines, reminders that even in our isolation, we weren't entirely alone. Each step forward felt like clawing my way out of quicksand. Every rejection, every pang of loneliness threatened to pull me back under, but I refused to give up. If I didn't fight for myself, who would? Margaret entered my life like an unexpected ray of sunlight breaking through a storm cloud. She was vibrant, kind, and carried herself with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. From the moment we met at the community center, where she volunteered to help organize events for seniors, I felt something stir within me, something I hadn't felt in years. At first, it terrified me. How could I allow myself to feel joy again after losing Sarah? Wasn't it disloyal to her memory to let another woman take up space in my heart? These questions haunted me as Margaret and I began spending more time together. Her laughter filled the silence in my home. Her presence brought warmth back into rooms that had grown cold, but still, guilt gnawed at me relentlessly. One afternoon, as we sat sipping tea on my porch, Margaret turned to me with a knowing smile. "Jack," she said softly, "I know you loved her deeply, and I'm not here to replace her, but don't you think Sarah would want you to be happy?" Her words struck me like a thunderclap, shaking loose some of the chains I'd wrapped around my own heart. Yet even then I couldn't fully let go of the past. Every time I laughed at one of Margaret's jokes or found comfort in her company, I felt as though I was betraying Sarah. The conflict inside me raged like a wildfire, consuming every ounce of peace I tried to build. Then came the day that changed everything. We were cooking dinner together, an activity that had become our ritual over the past few weeks, when Margaret slipped on a wet patch near the sink. She fell hard, hitting her head against the edge of the counter. For a moment, time froze. My heart pounded wildly as I rushed to her side, panic clawing at my chest. "Margaret!" I shouted, shaking her gently. When she didn't respond, I called an ambulance, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights and muffled voices. As I sat in the sterile waiting room, staring blankly at the walls, I realized just how much Margaret meant to me. It wasn't just companionship, it was something deeper, a connection I hadn't known I needed until she walked into my life. I thought about all the times she'd listened patiently as I poured out my fears, all the small ways she'd shown me kindness without expecting anything in return. And I realized caring for Margaret wasn't a betrayal of Sarah. It was an extension of the love I'd always believed in. Loving someone didn't diminish what I'd shared with Sarah. It added to it, enriching my life in ways I never imagined possible. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression grim, I braced myself for the worst. "She's stable," he said, "but she'll need rest and care while she recovers." Relief washed over me like a tidal wave, but it was quickly replaced by determination. That night, sitting beside her hospital bed, holding her hand, I promised myself and her that I wouldn't let fear or guilt keep me from embracing the second-hand happiness. Margaret wasn't just a friend anymore. She was family. And I intended to protect her, cherish her, and make sure she knew how much she mattered to me. The day Margaret told me she was leaving to live with her son, my world seemed to crumble beneath my feet. Her words, though spoken gently, hit me like a sledgehammer. I tried to mask my emotions, forcing a weak smile as I nodded in agreement. "It's wonderful news," I said, choking back the lump rising in my throat. "You should be with your family." But inside and out, a storm was brewing, our home, a tempest of grief and fear that threatened to consume me whole. As Margaret looked at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty, I could see the same ache reflected in them. She whispered, "I've gotten used to being here with you," her voice trembling like fragile glass on the verge of shattering. Before she left, Margaret took my hand in hers, gripping it tightly as if trying to anchor me to something solid. "Don't let loneliness swallow you whole," she said, her gaze piercing through me. Those words lingered long after she was gone, echoing relentlessly in my mind like a haunting melody I couldn't escape. That night, as the house fell silent once more, I lay in bed staring into the darkness. The tears came unbidden, streaming down my face until the pillow was soaked. I cried not just for Margaret's departure, but for the gaping void it left behind. A void so vast it felt like an abyss threatening to pull me under. In the days that followed, I spiraled into a deep depression. Food lost its taste. Even water felt like ash in my mouth. I stopped answering calls from Adam and Emily, unwilling to burden them with my despair. My once orderly life unraveled rapidly. I refused to leave my room, shutting myself away from the world as if hiding from some unseen predator. The silence became suffocating, pressing against me like a physical weight. Each tick of the clock reminded me how alone I truly was, each second stretching into eternity. Memories of Margaret haunted every corner of the house. The laughter we shared over meals, the quiet moments sitting together watching the sunset. Now, those memories only deepened my pain, twisting into sharp reminders of what I had lost. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the window, I caught a glimpse of Margaret's favorite chair, now empty. The sight sent a fresh wave of anguish crashing over me. How could something as simple as an unoccupied chair feel like such a cruel mockery of everything I had cherished? Margaret's parting words continued to torment me. "Don't let loneliness swallow you whole." Yet despite their warning, I felt powerless to fight it. Every attempt to push forward ended in failure, leaving me more defeated than before. It was as though the walls of my home were closing in, trapping me in a prison of my own making. I wondered if this was how life would end, not with a bang, but with a slow fade into nothingness, swallowed by the very solitude I feared most. When Adam and Emily first suggested I move to a nursing home, I felt as though they were sentencing me to an early grave. A nursing home? You want me to live out my final days in some cold, sterile place where people shuffle around like ghosts? I snapped, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. The thought of leaving the house where Sarah and I had built our lives together felt like betrayal, a cruel abandonment by my own children. I had always prided myself on being independent, but now it seemed they saw me as nothing more than a burden. My pride swelled in defiance, and I refused to entertain the idea any further. But fate has a way of humbling even the strongest among us. One night, as I lay alone in the darkness, a sharp cramp seized my leg, sending waves of pain coursing through my body. I tried to stand, but my muscles betrayed me, leaving me sprawled on the floor like a broken marionette. Panic set in as I called out for help, my voice echoing hollowly against the walls. No one answered. Hour after agonizing hour passed, each tick of the clock amplifying my despair. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling utterly abandoned, not just by my family, but by life itself. Tears streamed down my face as desperation seeped into every fiber of my being. In that moment, I realized how fragile my independence truly was. Without anyone to check on me, I could have died right there, unnoticed and unmissed. The next morning, when Adam arrived to find me still lying on the floor, his face turned pale with guilt and fear. He didn't say much, but I could see the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "Dad," he finally whispered, "maybe it's time we reconsider the nursing home." This time I didn't argue. Deep down, I knew he was right. Living alone wasn't just difficult, it was dangerous. Reluctantly, I agreed to make the move, though the thought filled me with dread. The day I stepped into the nursing home, I felt like a stranger in a foreign land. The flower gardens and activity rooms were beautiful, but they couldn't mask the underlying sadness that lingered in the air. Still amidst the unfamiliar faces, I met Mrs. Robinson, a kindred spirit who would soon become my closest companion. She greeted me with a warm smile, her eyes twinkling with mischief despite her age. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she joked, patting my hand gently. Her humor and resilience struck a chord within me, reminding me that even in this new chapter, life could still hold moments of joy. Over time, Mrs. Robinson and I grew inseparable. We shared stories, laughter, and even tears, finding solace in each other's company. For the first time since Margaret left, I began to feel a sense of belonging again. Though the transition hadn't been easy, I slowly came to understand that sometimes accepting help isn't a sign of weakness. It's an act of courage. And perhaps in this unexpected place, I could find a new purpose. The day Mrs. Robinson's accident occurred, my world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. I had just finished lunch when Adam called, his voice trembling with urgency. "Dad, it's Mrs. Robinson. She's been in a car crash." My heart seemed to stop as the phone nearly slipped from my hand. How could this happen? Just hours earlier, she had smiled at me, her warmth radiating like sunlight. Now I found myself rushing to the hospital, my mind racing with fear and dread. When I arrived, Adam and Emily stood outside the emergency room, their faces etched with worry. Inside, Mrs. Robinson lay motionless on the bed, her once vibrant spirit now flickering like a dying flame. As the doctors worked desperately, I held her frail hand, praying for a miracle. Then, in a moment that will haunt me forever, her eyes fluttered open. Her voice, barely audible, whispered, "Live well no matter how hard life gets." And with those final words, her grip loosened and she was gone. Her death left an emptiness so profound it felt like the universe itself had collapsed around me. For days, I refused to leave my room, shutting out the world entirely. Every knock on the door, every attempt by Adam or Emily to comfort me, fell flat against the fortress of grief I had built. Nights were the worst. One evening, unable to sleep, I stood before the mirror. What stared back at me wasn't the man I once knew. It was a shadow of someone broken, weary, and lost. The reflection of an old man, gaunt and defeated, forced me to confront a question I couldn't answer. What meaning does my life hold anymore? Each memory of Mrs. Robinson only deepened the ache. The laughter we shared, the quiet moments over tea, all now tainted by her absence. Her parting words echoed mercilessly in my mind, but instead of comfort, they brought torment. Could I truly live well without her? In the weeks following Mrs. Robinson's passing, I felt as though I was drowning in a sea of despair. Yet life has an uncanny way of weaving connections even in the darkest moments. One rainy afternoon, as I sat alone on a bench overlooking the garden, a new resident joined me, a frail man named Walter. He didn't speak much at first, but his silence spoke volumes. His eyes carried the same weight of loss and loneliness that I had come to know so intimately. We sat there together, two broken souls sharing nothing but quiet understanding. It wasn't until later when he finally muttered, "It's hard losing people," that I realized how profound our bond had become. In his presence, I found a glimmer of solace, a reminder that I wasn't truly alone. One stormy day, as rain lashed against the windows, I ventured outside into the courtyard. The cold wind whipped around me, but I welcomed it. It matched the turmoil within my heart. Standing amidst the damp flowers and swaying trees, memories flooded back like a tidal wave. I saw Sarah's radiant smile, heard Margaret's gentle laughter, and felt Mrs. Robinson's reassuring touch. Each memory was bittersweet, a testament to love lost but never forgotten. Though their physical presence had faded, the imprints they left behind remained etched in my soul, a source of strength and comfort. As the rain soaked through my coat, I came to a realization that shook me to my core. Relationships may end, but their essence lives on in us. Even in death, those we've loved continue to shape who we are. This epiphany ignited something inside me, a renewed sense of purpose. That night, I sat down with pen and paper, determined to write a letter to Adam and Emily. My hand trembled as I began, pouring out emotions I'd buried for far too long. "Dear children," I wrote, "I've spent years fearing loneliness, clinging to the past, and wondering if I mattered anymore. But now I understand that while life is fleeting, love endures. Please cherish the people in your lives. Hold them close, listen deeply, and never take them for granted. You don't realize how precious these moments are until they're gone." Tears blurred the ink as I sealed the envelope, but I felt lighter than I had in months. Writing those words wasn't just catharsis, it was acceptance. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could choose how to move forward. And perhaps in doing so, I could honor the legacy of everyone who had touched my life. As the years rolled by, I came to understand a profound truth about life. Love and happiness are not eternal flames. They flicker, dim, and sometimes extinguish. But even in their absence, they leave behind an indelible mark on our hearts. The laughter shared with Sarah, the quiet companionship of Margaret, the resilience of Mrs. Robinson, all these moments had shaped me into someone stronger than I ever imagined I could be. Though each relationship eventually faded, their essence remained alive within me, guiding my steps through the darkest nights. It was during one particularly reflective evening that I decided to share this lesson with Adam and Emily. Sitting them down in my modest room at the nursing home, I spoke earnestly, hoping they would carry this wisdom forward. Life isn't about avoiding loss, I told them, my voice steady despite the weight of my emotions. It's about how you face it when it comes. You can't protect yourself from pain. It's inevitable, but you can choose how to rise above it. Their eyes glistened as they listened, and for the first time I felt like they truly understood the depth of what I was trying to convey. The next morning, as rain clouds gathered overhead, I stepped outside into the courtyard. The sky unleashed its fury, drenching everything in sight. Yet instead of retreating indoors, I stood there, letting the cold droplets cascade over my weathered face. Each drop felt like a baptism, a cleansing of the sorrow, guilt, and fear that had clung to me for so long. In that moment, I realized something extraordinary. Peace doesn't come from escaping hardship. It comes from embracing it fully without resistance. I closed my eyes, tilting my head upward toward the heavens. Memories flooded back. Sarah's gentle touch, Margaret's vibrant smile, Mrs. Robinson's final whisper. But rather than filling me with grief, they brought comfort. They reminded me that every connection, no matter how fleeting, adds meaning to our existence. My heart swelled with gratitude for having experienced such love, even if it meant enduring the pain of losing it. When I opened my eyes, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a puddle. The man staring back at me was old, his face lined with wrinkles and his hair silvered by time. But there was something else, a quiet strength etched into his features, a testament to all he had endured and overcome. A soft smile spread across my lips, genuine and unforced. For the first time in years, I felt whole again, not because I had escaped loneliness, but because I had learned to live alongside it. Standing there under the pouring rain, I whispered to myself, "You've done well, Jack." And in that instant, I knew I had found my purpose, to teach others that while life may take away much, it also gives us the tools to endure, to grow, to triumph. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and deep crimson, I stood alone in the garden of the nursing home. The air was cool against my skin, carrying with it the faint scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. It was a moment suspended in time, a fragile pause between the chaos of life's storms and the quiet acceptance that had slowly taken root within me. My eyes traced the distant tree line, where shadows began to stretch long across the earth, swallowing light in their embrace. And yet, despite the encroaching darkness, something inside me felt unshakable, steadfast even. I thought about everything I'd endured, the loss of Sarah, the growing distance from Adam and Emily, the fleeting companionship of Margaret, and the devastating goodbye to Mrs. Robinson. Each chapter of my journey had been etched into my soul like scars on weathered bark, marks of survival, not defeat. Life had tested me relentlessly, throwing wave after wave of hardship at my feet. Yet here I was, still standing. Not because I was strong by nature, but because I had learned to draw strength from within. A reservoir of resilience I never knew existed until I had no other choice. The weight of those memories pressed heavily on my chest, but they no longer suffocated me. Instead, they reminded me of how far I'd come. I recalled the nights I'd lain awake, consumed by despair, wondering if there was any point to carrying on. I remembered the days when loneliness felt like an endless abyss, threatening to swallow me whole. But through it all, I had discovered something profound. The human spirit is capable of enduring unimaginable trials as long as we refuse to give up on ourselves. Standing there bathed in the golden glow of twilight, I realized that life isn't defined by the losses we suffer or the pain we endure. It's defined by how we rise after every fall, how we find meaning in the midst of chaos, and how we continue to love, even when love comes with the risk of heartbreak. I thought of Mrs. Robinson's final words to me, "Live well." At the time, her voice had been so soft, so fragile, yet those two simple words carried the weight of a lifetime. They weren't just advice, they were a challenge, a call to action. And now, as I faced the setting sun, I understood what she meant. My gaze hardened, determination flickering in my eyes like a flame refusing to be extinguished. "I've lived," I whispered to the wind, my voice steady despite the lump rising in my throat. "I've loved, and I have no regrets." The words hung in the air, carried away by the breeze, but they resonated deeply within me. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace, not because my life was perfect, but because I had finally embraced its imperfections. I had stopped fighting against the tides of change and instead learned to flow with them. To anyone reading this story, know this: life will break you. It will test your limits, push you to the brink, and leave you questioning whether you're strong enough to keep going. But you are. You are stronger than you realize, braver than you believe, and more resilient than you think. The key lies not in avoiding pain or loss. It's in how you face them. Draw upon the strength within you, nurture it, and let it guide you through the darkest nights. Remember, even in solitude, you are never truly alone. Your courage, your perseverance, your ability to adapt, these are the anchors that will hold you steady when everything else feels uncertain. As the last rays of sunlight faded, leaving only the soft glow of dusk behind, I turned back toward the nursing home. My steps were slow but deliberate, each one a testament to the lessons I'd learned. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, I walked forward with purpose, knowing that I had already overcome the greatest obstacle of all, myself.